Who was Norma McCorvey, the woman behind Roe versus Wade? I'm Tyrone Bowman. This is Tyrone Bowman Tonight. The topic of discussion, an article I found in the Smithsonian Magazine online entitled Women Who Shaped History. Let's talk about it. It's called Smart News. The article was written by Milan Solly, the 24th of June of this year. Quote, who was Norma McCorvey, the woman behind Roe versus Wade? Dubbed, quote, Jane Doe, close quote, McCorvey sought an abortion after becoming pregnant in 1969, but was thwarted by Texas restrictive reproductive laws. Quote, 49 years after Roe versus Wade upheld the constitutional right to abortion in the United States, the Supreme Court has overturned the landmark 1973 ruling, dealing a significant blow to reproductive rights nationwide and enabling some 24 states to imminently ban or limit access to the procedure. Passed by a majority of 6-3, the court's ruling on Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization arrives just under 2 months after the leak of a draft majority opinion by Justice Samuel Alito. First reported by Politico in early May, the draft represented, quote, a full-throated, unflinching repudiation, quote, of Roe, according to reporters Josh Gernstein and Alexander Ward. Today's final opinion, also by Alito, closely echoes the leaked draft, arguing that, quote, the authority to regulate abortions must be returned to the people and their elective representatives. Friday's decisions arrives at a time when a significant majority of Americans sought abortion's rights. According to a recent Pew Research Center survey, 61% of U.S. adults believe abortion should be legal in all or most instances, while 37% think it should be illegal in all or most cases. The partisan divide on abortion is far wider than it was 2 decades ago. Quote, notes Pew's Hannah Hartig in a blog post. As individuals across the country reckon with the prospect of a post-Roe America, the story of the court case that first codified the constitutional right to an abortion is making headlines once again. Here's what you need to know about Roe versus Wade and the women behind it. Norma McCorvey, better known as the pseudonym, quote, Jane Doe, close quote. In September 1969, the 21-year-old McCorvey became pregnant for the 3rd time. She'd had a difficult childhood, dropping out of school in the 9th grade and ending up in a reform school after a motel maid caught her and another girl kissing. McCorvey had relationships with both men and women, but self-identified as a lesbian. She wed for the first time at age 16, but divorced her husband when he became physically abusive. After giving birth to a daughter in 1965, she began struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, eventually relinquishing custody to her mother, though whether she did so voluntarily is up for debate. In 1967, she gave birth to a second child whom she put up for adoption. During her 3rd pregnancy, McCorvey hoped to get an abortion, but laws in her home state of Texas were highly restrictive, only allowing abortions if carrying the fetus to term threatened the mother's health. As Erwin Blakemore points out for National Geographic, McCorvey, quote, unlike wealthier and better resourced women, close quote, lacked the means to travel to one of the few states where she could get a legal abortion, and she could not afford to pay for one illegally. Quote, I was a woman alone with no place to go and no job, quote, McCorvey told the Southern Baptist Convention News Service in 1973, quote, "No one wanted to hire a pregnant woman. I felt there was no one in the world who could help me," close quote. Out of options, McCorvey turned to Dallas lawyers Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, who were in search of the perfect plaintiff for their attempt to challenge Texas's abortion laws. In 1970, when McCorvey was 5 months pregnant, she signed an affidavit that she later claimed to have never read. In the words of the New York Times' Robert D. McFadden, quote, "She just wanted a quick abortion and had no inkling that the case would become a case célèbre," close quote. McCorvey's lawyers filed the case at a federal district courthouse in Dallas on March 3, 1970, dubbed Roe v. Wade. The lawsuit anatomized McCorvey as, quote, "Jane Doe," close quote. The second half of its name refers to the defendant, Henry Wade, the district attorney charged with enforcing Texas abortion laws. Coffey and Weddington argued that Texas's abortion laws violated women's constitutional right to privacy. The district court ruled in the par's favor but dismissed the request to stop enforcing the state's old abortion laws, leading both Wade and McCorvey's team to appeal the decision to the Supreme Court. Weddington, then just 26, presented her oral arguments to the all-male Supreme Court on December 13, 1971. By then, notes Joshua Prager for The Atlantic, she and Coffey had made Roe into a class action suit demonstrating, quote, "the case for the constitutional right of all Americans to determine the path of their own lives." Just before opening arguments, 2 Supreme Court justices retired, leaving only 7 justices to hear the case, per the Embro Project. Pardon me, I lost my feet again. Wait a minute, this is real. This is real, y'all. I hate to do this, but I hate to do this. Pardon me, something happened with the feed here. I'll finish reading. I'll start here. Weddington, just 26, presented her oral arguments to the all-male Supreme Court on December 13, 1971. By then, notes Joshua Prager for The Atlantic, she and Coffey had made Roe into a class action suit, demonstrating, quote, "the case for the constitutional right of all Americans," close quote, "to determine the path of their own lives." Just before opening arguments, 2 Supreme Court justices retired, leaving only 7 justices to hear the case, per the Embro Project Encyclopedia. The renaming justices deemed the Texas laws unconstitutional by a 4-3 majority, but Justice Harry A. Blackmun, who'd been tasked with writing the majority opinion, suggested re-arguing the case in front of the full bench, a polarizing proposal that sparked fears among the majority that the 2 replacement justices would vote against him. Re-arguments took place on October 11, 1972, and the court issued its ruling on January 22, 1973, effectively legalizing abortion across the U.S. by a 7-2 majority. By the time the court ruled on Roe, McCorvey's pregnancy had long since ended. Unable to obtain an abortion, she gave birth to a baby girl on June 2, 1970. She subsequently gave the child up for adoption. Quote, "Roe v. Wade was a watershed for women in general, but irrelevant for Ms. McCorvey in particular," close quote, wrote the Washington Post's Emily Langer in McCorvey's 2017 obituary. For years after the Roe decision, McCorvey, who ultimately had limited involvement in the case, kept her identity as Jane Roe a carefully guarded secret, even hiding it from her long-term partner, Connie Gonzalez. On the day McCorvey finally revealed her role in the case, quote, "she picked up the newspaper, twiddling her thumbs real nervous," close quote. Gonzalez told the New York Times, Alex Witchell, quote, "and she told me about the Supreme Court decision, and I said, quote, 'that's fantastic,' close quote, and she said, 'but you're a Catholic,' and I said, 'so what? I feel a woman's got the right to choose.' And she said, 'well, I'm Jane Doe,' and I said, 'yeah, and I'm the Pope.' McCorvey started publicizing her story in the 1980s, advocating for the right to choose, but in 1995, she made an abrupt about face, declaring herself a born-again Christian and a staunch opponent of abortion. Soon before her death in 2017, McCorvey changed the story, once again claiming that she'd always supported abortion rights in an interview for the documentary, aka Jane Doe. She said, quote, I took anti-abortion advocates money and they put me out in front of the camera and they told me what to say, and that's what I say, close quote. When the documentary's director asked if it was all an act, McCorvey replied, quote, yeah, I was good at it too, close quote. In her 1994 memoir, I Am Rose, McCorvey offered a less cynical view of her place in the fight for reproductive rights. Quote, this feed's getting on my nerves, y'all. Quote, I wasn't the wrong person to become Jane Doe, close quote, she wrote. I wasn't the right person to become Jane Doe. I was just a person who became Jane Doe of Roe versus Wade. And my life story, warts and all, was a little piece of history, close quote. Never surrender, never quit.